Can you guys hear me now? Yes. Good, 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 good. All right. Hope everybody's having a great Sunday. How's that look? You look like a slut. I know. I'm sorry. This is because it's so freaking hot. All right, so we're gonna be watching a couple of YouTube videos, complain, and yeah, that's it. We're gonna watch this one a little later.
Cinema.
Perfect. So we're gonna watch Greed is Ruining Literally Everything from Diamond Bolt.
Video games. Hamburger. Today we're here to celebrate absolutely none of those things. Because tonight we're gathered here to appreciate the real stars behind all of your favorite works of art. The CEOs and shareholders that work tirelessly to find new and innovative lows to reach every single day. Like with the endless amount of streaming services, questionably legal hidden fees, and entirely unregulated copyright law lets big companies claim ownership of things they didn't even make in the first place. Hello again, everyone.
Oh yeah, that was pretty gross.
If you're only just joining us now, then you've made it just in time for the final award of the night, where of course we crown 2026's most shamelessly greedy company.
Nice.
There's so many incredible multi-billion-dollar conglomerates to honor here tonight, but only one of them has the privilege of being selected for this incredibly petty award. Starting off our nominations for the night, I thought we should look to the games industry and all of the people behind it that through tireless work
That's going to shit right now.
to bring some of the most acclaimed games to life. That's why every single one of them was laid off so they could be replaced with the latest innovations in technology, like saving $15 on the art for achievements in Call of Duty by using AI. And using AI to have Fortnite Darth Vader make his way through every slur in the English dictionary.
Oh wow.
But you know, between like 2K games copy-pasting the exact same game 20 years in a row with the only changes being made to the number on the box and on the store page, and studios like Ubisoft and Blizzard leading the charge on Spider-Man's rights back by about 15 years. And then of course we have a two-time winner of the most hated company in America award and recipient of the most hated Reddit comment of all time, EA. Regularly avoided for all of their invaluable contributions to the gaming industry, like turning all their sports games into slot machines, turning all their Star Wars games into slot machines, and for being the entire reason that even 13-year-old who regularly wasted his life on shit like Talking Tom and Ben News still wouldn't touch Plants vs. Zombies 2 because they also turned it into a slot machine. But I think this year they've all been dethroned by the hardworking talents of Sony, who have made it their life's mission to make sure we never actually
the removal of the physical disc, that's crazy.
own a single thing in your entire life by making games that you already bought entirely unplayable as soon as they can't be bothered running the servers anymore, and deciding that they've had enough of bearing the cost of the 15 cents per disc it cost them to make a physical game, and more importantly, the $15 that you paid Craig for a used copy of GTA 5 on Facebook Marketplace. And they know they don't even have to defend themselves because they have like half of Reddit doing it for them. And inspiring others like the famously selfless Rockstar, who despite being as aware as anyone that GTA 6 is going to make the most money out of anything ever made, is not only going to cost a record high $80 to play it, and then locking half of the features out of the game anyway so they can charge people another $100 to play the real version, still isn't going to come with a disc. Craig on Facebook Marketplace is having the worst day of his life right now.
It used to come with a map. It used to come with the artwork. It used to have so much shit. But now, cutting costs is more important.
Which wouldn't be that big of a deal if literally like 4 days before we found this out, they hadn't just purged over 500 movies from people's accounts that they already bought because their licensing expired, and now they're making that your problem. Are they going to refund you? No. I know, right? Now, I don't know about you, but I think it's pretty cool that we live in a world that has like so many different subscription services to choose from. I mean, what would we do without BMW charging you 18 bucks a month to have access
And
to
not just
heated seats that are
BMW.
already in the car but disabled unless you pay them? Or Mercedes charging you a subscription to use CarPlay, even though my car, which honestly can barely be considered road legal, can do it for free. I mean, no wonder these guys don't use their turn signals if they gotta pay $12.99 a month to do it. Bazinga.
That's a good one.
I mean, I gotta shout out Ticketmaster for charging you more in fees than the actual cost of the ticket between the processing fee and tax and the service fee because they, you know, because of all the service they're providing on an automated website with zero human involvement and the facility charge that you have to pay for because, you know, because, and then of course, you know, their method to deal with the rampant issue of ticket scalping, which was to do absolutely fucking nothing because that way they can collect the service fees twice. I mean, that's like the kind of greed that you can only get from my dog. And then you have Airbnb, who charge you a cleaning fee and then still make you clean it up anyway. And then, of course, we have our beloved Uber Eats, who went above and beyond by enlisting the help of Gordon Ramsay himself to assemble all of your orders with the way they're charging me.
It's odd, no, because the Airbnb host is the one putting the fee, right?
Fucking $12 for a Happy Meal. For providing people with the invaluable service of a private limo for their chicken nuggets. And have somehow, like, come up with a system that connects restaurants, customers, and delivery drivers, and then scams the absolute shit out of all three of them. And for anyone watching that's from the US, where you use like DoorDash and Grubhub way more, I'm just saying over here in Australia, I'm pretty sure like 90% of the population would rather spend $47 on a burger from Uber than ever cook a single meal in their entire life.
Wow.
I found out recently that the Uber Eats app is literally like a pay-to-win system where like the more money that you give them from each sale, the more likely you are to show up on the app. Because they take, at minimum, a 15 to 30% cut from every single order for the privilege of being on their app despite doing none of the work. And I didn't even know this. Like, I just assumed that the things that came up first on the app were things that were like close to me or at least well-reviewed, but no. But, like, they know that these restaurants are going to pay for it because of how hard it is for people to go and get food themselves, you know? You got to, like, put pants on, and then you got to drive, like, 5 minutes. I mean, come on. And then you have the drivers who also have half of their earnings stolen by Uber, but know that if they try and turn any of them down because they want to get paid, you know,
They won't
more than
get
$1
anything.
for driving for half an hour, then they'll just give it to someone else who will, and then offer you less work in the future. The same people that they're just trying to replace with robots anyway. Or making it maybe the only app that might have more fees than Ticketmaster, with the service fee, tax, local operating fee, delivery fee, adjustment, long range fee, small order, busy area fee, priority fee, that literally doesn't do anything. Why is the service fee different to the delivery fee? Is that not the, I thought that was the service. Oh, you still want a tip though, right? But I don't think any of them are as deserving of a nomination than Adobe, a company that's so evil that I feel more unethical paying for it than I would if I pirated it. I mean, just look at their CEO, bro. They're not even being subtle about it. And, like, I don't think anyone has been able to replicate how impressive it is that they were able to put out, like, one of the most revolutionary suites of apps that changed the entire industry, you know? Photoshop, Adobe Premiere, and the other ones. And then gradually making all of them so expensive and hard to run that nobody wants to use them anymore. And then the way that these guys keep their customers loyal is by charging anyone that tries canceling their subscription with the entire national debt of Greece. Like, you may have signed up to a monthly subscription, but that was actually for the year. So if you try and cancel, you still have to pay the rest of that. We just forgot to tell you about it. And have such a good working relationship with their user base that definitely doesn't panic every time they put out a new update, just in case they're secretly using your work to train AI, which then slows down the product you're using even more somehow. So I must be Spider-Man 3 because I'm good, actually. I mean, what other company is so evil that the actual US government had to step in, like Frieza teaming up with Goku to fight Jiren, and sue them for $150 million for hiding fees? A huge victory for customers where Adobe's subscription model hasn't changed at all, but they do have to put tiny little text warning you about it now. So, got him. But look, you don't have to be an Adobe customer to have had something like this happen to you, you know? I mean, I'm sure there's been a point in your life where you've been grocery shopping and you notice that all of a sudden that Pringles has diversified into a company that also sells you air. And, you know, while everything is getting smaller and worse all of the time, at least the Big Mac is still out here repping guys like us by calling itself Big.
Like there's a whole subreddit dedicated to all the ways that things are getting in shitified. Maybe we should take a look at it.
Even though it's only about 4 inches long. But then, on the other hand, they're the sole reason that copyright law takes 100 years to expire, and creators of all of the live-action remakes of your favorite movies. Give it up, everybody, for Disney, who are, like, so aware that they spent the last 50
These are
years
so
creating
bad.
some of the most beloved movies of all time, and will now spend the next 50 exploiting the shit out of that as much as possible. Like, for example, their blatantly shameless Disney Vault technique they had back in the
Yeah.
day, right? Where, like, for example, you know, let's say you're a normal company that, like, puts out a movie you made onto home video so people can, like, you know, buy and watch it whenever they want. But Disney used to have this strategy where they'd only re-release their movies for a super short window, like once every decade or so they could bombard you with ads about how you'd have to buy it literally right now before they burn every copy of it for the remainder of your lifetime.
After March 31st, Disney will stop selling this timeless classic. Hurry, this Easter is your last chance.
That is literally creating FOMO.
For years to come.
And then they've also somehow convinced the
That's
entire
crazy.
American population that Disneyland is like a human right. I mean, how could you miss out on the $10 Mickey Mouse pretzel?
Oh,
15-hour wait times for every ride. And that's why over half the people that go are willing to put themselves into debt to do it. But they're also like a company that's so dedicated to micromanaging its IPs that they were totally cool with taking Spider-Man off of the grave of a dead child, and more importantly, shut down all of the Club Penguin fan servers after the game went down, and ending my passionate affair with my first love, Pink Girl 6657. But then also like invested billions into an AI company, so anyone can make as much shitty AI slop of their IP as they want. I mean, they've canceled it now, but like they were totally gonna do that. And like I think the only one who can challenge their dedication to not letting anyone have any fun is the Ellen of video game companies, Nintendo. Truly beloved by millions for being so dedicated to protecting their family-friendly image that they're the sole reason the entire population of Italy is too scared to name their children Mario or Luigi so they don't get a cease and desist letter instead of a birth certificate. I mean, who could forget the iconic Nintendo Partner Program, where in a world where even companies as evil as Microsoft wouldn't stoop to the level of beefing with YouTube Let's Players, Nintendo was just that guy. To make sure they got all of the 45 cents of ad revenue from part 2 of your Hotel Mario gameplay. Where you're still more likely to see someone successfully release a Pokemon fan game than you are ever see a Nintendo game go on sale. And look, while they might not have the money to make any Pokemon game more graphically advanced than the PS1, what they do have is an unwavering mission to taking down massive threats to their bottom line, like this grocery store called Super Mario, YouTube videos, and charity events that were playing their games. And most importantly, Bowser's penis. But look, okay, in their defense, both of these guys did have pretty good reasons for some of these, alright? Like, was that supermarket also selling bootleg Nintendo merch? Yes. Were the Club Penguin fan servers completely unregulated and populated by people who definitely need to be in jail? Also, yes. And did some guy in the Nintendo office definitely just get caught looking at Bowser porn and then had to double down on it being a work thing? Probably. But nothing will ever come close to the time that someone died from an allergic reaction at one of the restaurants in Disney Springs, and they argued that their right to sue was voided because their partner had signed up for a trial of Disney Plus one time. Yeah. But, I mean, like, can you blame them?
That's
That
crazy.
would have meant they would have had to pay, like, $50,000 to the grieving family of someone who died. And that was, like, you know, the entire box office of the new Moana remake. Not liable
That's
for your
good.
death. So, now that we've looked at our nominees, it's finally time for the moment you've been waiting for. Out of all of the nominees, the award for the greediest company of all time
Oh, you guys can't
goes
hear
to...
him. Sorry.
Brad. Hi. I'm wearing a shirt that has horses on it. And before we
It was a
award the
little
winners
distracting.
tonight, I have to talk about something that no one on YouTube has ever complained about before. And I'm really sorry to do this. The copyright system. Oh god, no. Cut the feed. Cut the feed right now. Recently I dropped a video that critics were calling like the greatest 15-minute background noise they've ever had while taking a shit in their life. Which, you know, if I'm being honest, was like one of the hardest videos I've ever had to make. Both because I just couldn't figure out how to get it right, and also because I had to watch Family Guy. And after weeks of staying up late editing on a barely functional Adobe Premiere, all that hard work paid off when I woke the next morning, to a copyright claim from the multi-billion-dollar conglomerate Warner Brothers for using less than a minute of Riverdale footage. And of course, you know, they could have claimed it when it was sitting there for 3 whole days before it went public. But no, of course, they picked the moment it's too late for me to do anything about it. And you know, I wonder why that is. Luckily, though, I was always taught to not.
That's because they have strategies, right? There are companies dedicated to scanning that. So I think it's not Warner Brothers themselves, right? They hire they hire like these firms that specializes in that.
Be like petty and spiteful, which is why like I don't want to make a big deal out of it.
Or maybe
You know,
they're
like,
doing it
I don't
themselves.
think like I would never do that. And then immediately below that email, another claim from Paramount for another video for using less than 30 seconds of footage from Sonic 3, including this clip, which is not even from Sonic 3. And then after that, I got another claim, and then another
Wow.
one, and another one, and another one. And like some of these videos are like 8 years old. Like Paramount had absolutely no beef with top 15 scariest moments in Transformers until 8 years later. And now they're trying to rob the world of one of the greatest videos on YouTube.
To celebrate everyone's favorite spooky month, I thought we should take a look at the scary side of Transformers.
Can you please turn it off before he starts explaining how copyright law works? So to explain how this works to those of you who haven't had the pleasure of listening to a YouTuber complain about how hard their job is, I think everyone knows by now that trying to fight a copyright claim is one of the riskiest things a YouTuber can do other than go near a school, which the guys making these claims are
No.
perfectly aware of and know that you probably aren't going to take that risk, so they can just like do whatever they want. Which is why every single time they'll reject your first dispute, but then magically change their mind on the second one as soon as they would have actually been held legally accountable. That's crazy. The company making the claim, of course, risks and loses absolutely nothing, which is so cool. Take the shot. Take the shot right now. And I just think what really drives me insane about these claims is we're talking about like one of the biggest movie studios in the entire world. Like, do they really
What?
need that money? And after doing a bit of research, it turns out, yes, actually, they actually do.
Warner Brothers Discovery announced today that it is putting itself up for sale.
And so that's why for our
Oh, yeah,
highest
that's the
honor of
whole
the night,
thing.
the award goes to Warner Brothers, the studio that shows their passion and dedication to the art of film by deleting entire movies because it saves them a bit of money on their taxes, and deleting shows from their streaming services so they don't have to pay anyone that made them because it saves them a bit of money on their taxes. But of course, they couldn't just be satisfied with being one of the biggest movie studios of all time. They had to get bigger. They had to get more money. The line must go up. So they just had to merge with Discovery and absorb a tiny bit of their debt of $27 billion. And so they had to make some pretty tough lifestyle changes with a lot of layoffs and cancellations and dropping their CEO's yearly pay from $51 million to $200 million a year, and ended up losing so much money every year that the only thing that could save them was an even greedier studio, Paramount Pictures. You see where this is going, right? Who are fusing together like Gogeta if his special technique was being the most unemployed person of all time. And like, you know, right now that deal is like still ongoing, but it would mean that like one of the biggest movie studios would like own and control like a third of every movie ever. And it pretty much benefits everybody, you know, because with less competition, that means the prices are going to go up and the quality is going to go down and like tons of people are going to lose their jobs. But it's fine because that Justice League Transformers crossover is going to go crazy, bro. But wait, how is Paramount buying another studio if they themselves are also billions of dollars in debt? Honestly, who cares anymore? And that's when I realized why they were doing this. Because they both literally don't have any money. All right, they actually did need that 15 cents in ad revenue. So, you know what? Now when I look at this, I don't see it as a greedy company trying to hoard even more of its disgusting amount of wealth. Now I see it as like doing charity work for those in need. So yeah, you know, thanks
That's
for
good.
watching, and we'll see you next year. So you are under arrest.
Bro. That was a funny one.
People are apparently going into debt to go on a Disney vacation.
Do we want to see that? Oh, this is pretty interesting. Why dying civilizations always turn to gambling, thinking West. And as we know, there's a lot of gambling. It's been absolutely normalized at this point, right? The gambling epidemic. So let's see historically why that is. That is true.
You've seen the ads: sports betting apps, online casinos, and prediction markets. Your favorite podcaster is promoting them, and they're
Yeah,
plastered across
that's
family
so
friendly
sad.
TV networks during prime time. Gambling is absolutely everywhere and is completely hijacking our culture. But this new high risk economy is really a timeless symptom of a dark reality. Whenever a civilization embraces extreme risk as a legitimate way to get rich, it's the ultimate warning sign that society
It's the
is
end.
desperate. Gambling has always existed, but at specific moments in history, a mania for novelty and risk becomes a coping mechanism for the deteriorating conditions of a culture. For some, high stakes gambling seems like the only viable option left to move up in the world.
Yep.
We're seeing this exact desperation play out right now, especially among young people who feel that the traditional modes of success have been permanently blocked.
I mean, you can see it in the side hustle culture. It's been normalized. You have to do something else. You have to find any means to get that lucky break, right? Where, you're gonna make it as well. I myself have tried a whole bunch of weird and dumb shit. I mean, I tried drop shipping in like 2017 because at that point I was feeling pretty desperate, When you're desperate, you're not too shy to try weird things. And that is also why people take advantage of it. So you got to be careful.
And many are turning to risky behaviors like online betting or cryptocurrencies in place of safe career paths. So, what happens to a society when its people stop investing in the future and start betting on it instead? To understand where we're headed, we have to look at what happens when power structures become so stifling that vice becomes the only way to make it. 2,000 years ago, a similar gambling mania exploded across the dying Roman Republic, and the powerful figures who took advantage of that desperation ended up plunging civilization into civil war and political chaos.
Hmm.
So let's see how it played out back then and why we need to be vigilant today about this high stakes trend. In the 1st century BC, right around the time the Roman Republic collapsed, the poet Horace made a surprising observation about the youth of his day. He noted that the upper class youth no longer cared for virtuous interests like horseback riding and hunting, but were instead enthralled by games of chance, like gambling and dice. Horace writes, "Now the noble's firstborn shuns the perilous chase, nor learns to sit his steed. Set him to the unlawful dice or Grecian hoop, how skillfully he plays."
Grecian
To
hoop.
Horace, this abandonment of tradition
All right, I'm sorry. We gotta check what that means or what it was. Hmm. Hopefully, he's gonna
gambling
explain.
activities was a sure sign of decline. The youth of any civilization are the future, after all. So, what happens when an entire generation abandons the traditions that built society? Horace was not the only one who observed this disturbing trend. Later, the 4th century Roman historian Marcellinus reflected on the last days of the Republic, describing a gambling mania that spread across all Roman social classes, and especially the wealthy. These upper class gamblers called themselves tesserari, meaning dicer, as the more common word for gambler, alliator, carried a somewhat negative connotation. Gambling to them wasn't a
Yeah, I guess we have the same thing right now, right? So you have classes of gambling. If you see somebody buying lottery tickets, you know, he's a he's a poor person. He's It's not right. It doesn't feel right to look at. It doesn't feel right to think about somebody wasting, their money buying fucking lottery tickets, scratch off tickets. But if you hear about Dana White who loses millions of dollars, in one sitting playing baccarat or whatever the fuck, oh, that's classy, that's nice because it is so much money that it makes it have a proper optic, which is absolutely disturbing.
Major vice, but Marcellinus thought differently. Marcellinus believed that the gambling mania that overtook Rome in the late Republic was a major factor in its fall. He claimed that the elite's obsession with gambling prevented anything memorable or serious from being done in Rome. Rome's upper classes were too busy squandering their wealth and time to actually address the serious matters of the day. Horace's and Marcellinus' caution against gambling was nothing new, though. Romans had long been weary of the dangers of decadence. In 200 BC, long before the Roman Republic fell, the Senate enacted a statewide ban on gambling, called the Lex Alieria. It had exceptions for certain holidays and was likely not enforced very heavily, but it served as a symbol that Roman citizens should follow the social customs and traditions of their virtuous ancestors, which taught discipline and temperance. But roughly 100 years after the Lex Alieria was implemented, it was obvious to everyone that the traditional values of Rome were nothing more than an aspiration. So, what was going on in Rome at the time that caused people to abandon social traditions and embrace degeneracy? Numerous ancient historians write about the general moral decay of the late Republic, but perhaps what best exemplifies the cultural and economic issues of the time was the battle between the Optimates and the Populares. Once we understand the fundamental divide of Roman politics in the late Republic, we'll realize why massive risk taking became the only option for some. Their gambling mentality was a symptom of structural problems that ran much deeper in the Roman political and economic systems. And yes, there are parallels to today. When an entire generation becomes politically and economically dispossessed, traditions go out the window, and radical action becomes the only real path forward. The Optimates and Populares were two factions of the Roman political class that were mortal enemies.
Sorry about that.
The Optimates were the conservative elite who aimed to keep power in the Senate and protect aristocratic wealth. They valued tradition, bureaucratic means, and the continued oligarchy that those ensured. Opposing them were the populares, who appealed to the needs of the people, like debt relief and expanded citizenship. They often tried to bypass the Senate and took matters directly to the plebeian assembly to win the masses. The major issue at the time was land reform for small farmers and dispossessed veterans. As Rome had expanded, it incorporated a large population of cheap labor, namely slaves. The large slave populations could be used by wealthy citizens, often supporters of the Optimates, to undercut their competition. Small farmers and landowners couldn't compete with the wealthy oligarchs who could afford many slaves. Likewise, veterans who had given up their farms to serve in long campaigns came back to nothing. They couldn't afford to upkeep their estates while gone, and there were limited options when they finished their service. The populares like Caesar sought to remedy this situation by giving plots of land to veterans and limiting the influx of slaves to Italy, but the Optimates opposed any reform. A dangerous scenario emerged from these conditions: massive wealth disparity between the upper class, who benefited from the cheap labor of slaves, and the dispossessed soldiers who had been stripped of their farms.
Oh my god, is this a parallel with the AI, like the GE class?
The sheer amount of these dispossessed soldiers was a serious threat to stability, and tensions among the classes were heating up. For the upper classes, they felt untouchable. They were doing better than ever, and the vast wealth they were accumulating was leading to the vice and licentiousness we talked about earlier. They gambled and debauched out of sheer frivolity, but in increasingly reckless amounts. The poet Juvenal eyed this tendency during his own time, shortly after the Republic's fall. He observed that the wealthy in Rome had much to spend on gambling, but nothing for the poor. When was gambling so reckless? Men come not now with purses to the hazard of their gaming table, but with a treasure chest beside them.
Wow.
Is it a simple form of madness to lose 100,000 sesterces and not have a shirt to give to a shivering slave? On the other end of the spectrum, the soldiers and farmers who had given their lives to Rome now had no clear path to reclaim their livelihoods. They were becoming increasingly desperate, and surely more than a few began to make foolish gambles to recover their lost wealth. Will and Ariel Durant, in their work Lessons of History, write of the economic desperation. Rome was full of men who had lost their economic footing and their moral stability. Soldiers who had tasted adventure and had learned to kill. Citizens who had seen their savings consumed in the taxes and inflation caused by war.
Oh my
With
god.
economic pressures reaching such high levels, traditional moral codes were brushed aside. Why obey the cultural codes of our ancestors if we don't have a future? They asked. Why sacrifice more for a republic that will give us nothing? Radical change must be the only option. This is the desperate attitude that Caesar capitalized upon, and what would plunge the republic into a full-fledged civil war, ultimately ending it for good. It's quite ironic, actually, that Caesar's famous words before crossing the Rubicon, "The die is cast," would be a reference to the dice games that were so representative of the collapsing moral and economic framework of Rome. The gambling and moral degeneracy of the late Republic was the outlet of a desperate people, frustrated that cold economic self-interest had become more important to the Roman elite than the well-being of their fellow citizens. This pattern of monetary obsession morphing into political and moral chaos is a pattern that repeats throughout history. Elites abandon tradition for degeneracy due to a weakening of their moral constitution, while lower classes attempt novel political solutions to solve their economic woes out of sheer desperation. The root of the problem always lies in what the culture prioritizes above all else, specifically money. The 20th century German philosopher Oswald Spengler made this exact point in his work The Decline of the West. He believed that a fundamental shift in a culture always occurs when a dictatorship of money emerges. When a society becomes solely motivated by monetary incentives, radical economic and political turmoil becomes inevitable. A Caesar is then needed to upend the corrupt and stagnant system that only benefits the chosen elite. Spengler claimed that in late-stage cultures, traditional values like honor, temperance, and duty are ignored because they do not serve a monetary purpose. Virtue has no return on investment. The oligarchs can only conceptualize things that are personally beneficial to their pocketbooks. Spengler writes, "What is here is the stage of a culture at which tradition and personality have lost their immediate effectiveness, and every idea, to be actualized, has to be put into terms of money." We saw this in late Rome with the elite's embrace of slave labor, even to the detriment of their fellow countrymen, the very men who had fought for the benefit of Rome. And I think it's happening again today. Certainly our traditional ethics have eroded, and we see an unprecedented display of moral deterioration every time we open social media or watch TV. High-stakes gambling in particular has become so ubiquitous in recent years that you can't avoid the constant bombardment of advertisements pushing the vice as casually as cleaning products or footwear. But I want to emphasize that this brazen promotion of gambling is simply a symptom of a much larger issue. Spengler's statement that every idea to be actualized has to be put into terms of money finds no better embodiment than in modern online betting markets. Everything from tomorrow's weather to the breakout of war is now
That's so crazy. You know, just because of the way that it's presented, it makes it legal. So, these like Poly Market and the other one, they're not like gambling markets, right? What the fuck is a prediction market even mean? That is that is so weird, you know? Like the same type of logic that you would get if you were to transmit your sins to a chicken, you know?
Now monetized. Every event, idea, person, and thought carries the potential to make or lose money. A chance of rain carries with it the anticipation of a profit. Nuclear apocalypse, the hope of a life changing payout. Money has become the gauge of life activity itself. One of the things Spangler points out is how power structures become overwhelmingly rigid once this dictatorship of money takes hold of a culture. He says that at the beginning of a culture, man was wealthy because he was powerful. But in the dictatorship of money, a man is powerful because he has money. When a culture's highest
Because this keeps occurring over and over and over again.
measure of value is financial success, the prerequisite for any leadership or decision making position becomes money itself. Thus, wealth must be the primary aim for one who wishes to make a difference in society. It becomes a positive feedback loop where only the wealthy can make decisions, and the only way to get in a position of power to make decisions is to have wealth in the first place.
Go to Aneba.com and buy games cheaper than ever before. Get instant access to the popular games and the biggest titles.
Is it any wonder
That's
that
for
one
my
might risk
broke
it all in the
ass.
betting markets if this is the hand they believe they've been dealt? Is it surprising that the dispossessed veterans and farmers put their faith in Caesar? Now, to be clear, I'm not sure we've reached economic or political challenges equal to that of the late Republic yet, but the signs are increasing, and we're seeing desperation on both fronts. But the real fear here is that we're going down a path of no return, that a political upheaval like Caesar is inevitable once a civilization reaches this stage. Spangler certainly thought so, but the Durants took a different view. They believed that Athens in 594 BC narrowly avoided revolution despite being in a similar situation economically and politically. The Durants pull from Plutarch and show that initially the relationship between the classes was only worsening. According to Plutarch, the disparity of fortune between the rich and the poor had reached its height, so that the city seemed to be in a dangerous condition, and no other means of freeing it from disturbances seemed possible but despotic power. The poor, finding their status worsen with each year, the government in the hands of their masters and the corrupt courts deciding every issue against them, began to talk of violent revolt. The rich, angry at the challenge to their property, prepared to defend themselves by force. But Solon, a businessman of aristocratic lineage, rose to power and provided a solution. He reduced all personal debts and ended imprisonment for debt. He canceled outstanding payments for taxes and mortgage interest. He established a graduated income tax. He reorganized the courts on a more popular basis. And he arranged that the sons of those who had died in war for Athens should be brought up and educated at the government's expense. The Durants emphasized that Solon's solution was a middle ground between what the most extreme ends of either side wanted. The rich protested that his measures were outright confiscation. The radicals complained that he had not redivided the land. But within a generation, almost all agreed that his reforms had saved Athens from revolution. Now, I'm not going to claim Solon's solution would work out today, as our challenges don't necessarily map out perfectly onto the Athenians' problems. But the key here is that Solon's solution provided a pathway to earn skin in the game for those who currently had none. And this is what we need to ensure we have today. It's about a clear pathway to contribute to society and feel like your work makes a difference, while also being compensated for that work. It's about a clear pathway for success, where hard work actually pays off. It's about the ability for an honorable man to rise in society rather than be crushed. Because if we don't provide these things as a culture, we'll get more young men and young women deciding that being honorable just isn't worth it. That the hard work and virtuous character touted by past generations as the best way to live doesn't pan out. We'll get more moral depravity and desperation. If there's anything we learn by
I wonder what it's going to look like if it's pushed to the extreme, right? Because we're pretty deep into it already, right? In the music, in the movies, TV shows, what is presented, everything is already pretty extreme. So what what does it look like after you start seeing the decay, the real decay, and people really giving up?
studying history is that
Because right now, we still are in the fantasy that everything is going just as it has always had.
the major problems of mankind crop up time and time again. We need to be vigilant of these patterns because it will help us identify their symptoms long before they snowball into larger problems. History doesn't give us all the solutions, but it does show us the map. It's up to us to find out where we are and how we can get to our destination without getting swallowed up by the rough terrain and dangerous traps along the way. So with that, I want to tell you about one more thing before you go. If you enjoy our video content, we have a lot more to offer over on Substack. It's where we publish weekly in-depth essays on the same meaningful topics we discuss here. It's also the best
And then pause it. I think the
way to
pages,
support us.
yeah.
As the internet is increasingly taken over by cheap AI slop, it's important to support us real human creators so that we can make more of what's meaningful. I'll drop a link in the description.
That's awesome. That was a great video. I think I have not been seeing a lot of Papa Meets videos lately. Yeah, I think this is gonna be a good one. Let's switch it up a little bit.
The way you use the web is changing.
All right, so CBC, say goodbye to the internet as you know it.
From searching websites to AI now giving you an answer.
We see it as a channel that people can use to learn about the world, and that's what we're here for.
But if AI uses the web for you, that means a revolution in how we get information.
What's changed is who actually reads the website.
From what to buy, to what you learn, to what to trust.
You're creating a bit of a monoculture where there's just one voice, and frankly, it's the voice of a robot.
You've probably noticed the humble Google search box has been reimagined for the first time in 25 years. You can chat with Google's AI or read an AI overview. And Claude
You can. I mean, they actually forced it down your throat. You cannot escape it.
ChatGPT, Copilot, Grok can also answer your questions, recommend products, or do more complex tasks like planning an itinerary for your vacation, all without you going to individual websites, replacing traditional search. But all that convenience means the web is increasingly designed not just for you and me to read it, but for machines to.
The biggest impact is, are machines going to read your content?
There are hackers out there that want nothing more than to cause damage and wreak havoc. There are hackers out there that are protecting.
In order to make the cut and show up in AI's answer,
you really need to do the work behind the scenes so that even though you have decline in traffic, it doesn't actually result in less business.
I mean, this is nothing new. You had to do SEO optimization or search engine optimization, right? So you had to do work already to do it with the regular Google search. So there's nothing that different in just doing the same thing for the LLM models.
That means your website doesn't just need SEO, search engine optimization, so you turn up high in search engine results for clicks. It needs GEO, generative engine optimization, tweaking the website so the content is more likely to be cited in AI summaries.
I mean, there's a LLM.txt file, I think, that you have to have as well. Before it used to be robots.txt. Just a little bit of information to, how the Google crawler would take the information. So you have essentially the same thing, but just for LLM. So I don't see how big of a revolution that is. But it is true that as time passes, more and more of the internet traffic is just robots. So that's pretty weird.
And that's where someone like Hamza Kadim comes in. His company specializes in optimizing websites so they can be found and made machine readable for AI.
So you might have this as a previous why choose us section, and this would be a much more complete why choose us section. People aren't going to necessarily read all that, but AI definitely will. The previous take on this was small, digestible content bits meant purely for human consumption. Now our first reader is the AI crawler.
So, sure, if you're providing a service or selling a product, you need to do what you can to make sure your customer is going to see what you have to offer when AI spits out an answer. But it's more than e commerce.
Well, at this moment, this is what makes the difference, right? Because you have companies that just don't do it at all right now. So you're going to have a leg up on them.
It's about all the news and reliable content we value on the web. And what happens to the information you turn to online when there are no longer enough humans reading it?
If you think about this, it's all just the arc of computing, right?
Mark Surman is the president of Mozilla. You probably know them best as the people who make the Firefox browser.
One of the bargains of the web that I think has been so great is it lets us all be creators. It lets us consume what everybody is creating. And it kind of feels like it's free because advertising supports much of it. Once you roll that all inside of a chatbot, you lose the ability for us to kind of make that economic bargain.
In short, ads and subscriptions pay for people to produce online content. But why put an ad on a website if the visitors are machines, not people? Human traffic to websites is declining. One report found that clicks on retail, software, IT, and finance websites declined by as much as 40% in less than 1 year. If humans don't see online
Decline.
ads or pay for
All
subscriptions,
right.
revenue dries up, and that eats away at content creators' ability to fund their work.
I've definitely searched for a Smitten Kitchen recipe for something, and I get a summary or a chunk of my own recipe in the AI blurb that you have. It's honestly shocking to me that somebody can publish my work for me without my permission.
Deb Perlman is the New York-based food blogger behind Smitten Kitchen, a very popular online source for recipes.
The context of a recipe is really important, and where it came from and what it means and what you can do within all those questions that people fill comment sections with. You're not going to get that from a blurb on top of a search result that has been extracted, perhaps correctly, perhaps incorrectly, from the actual recipe.
And it's that ability to get an editorial perspective, not just an AI summary, that speaks to the promise of the World Wide Web.
One of the great things about the web is that you just sort of see voices from everywhere. And social media actually contracted that in some
See
ways, where we exist
voices.
in these bubbles of like people who reinforce our opinions. And AI summaries could make that dramatically worse, where you're just in this bubble of like one voice based on what my AI thinks.
Yeah, you don't say. I mean, this is government control or, the worst dystopian shit you can imagine it's right there.
Wikipedia runs off of two things basically: donors and editors. Both of those, in the current model that we have, require that people come to our site.
Next time you look at one of Google's AI summaries, notice how many of them cite Reddit, YouTube, and Wikipedia, human created sources of information, power
Yeah,
AI
because
results.
they had deals where they train their models with it, or they have access to this information. Uh, what was it? For they stole the music from Spotify, whatever. They were giving access to the data that they had stolen to train LLM models. So, I mean, this is not super surprising.
In many cases, if you're asking a question about facts about the world of an AI chatbot, those answers are still coming from.
And this is also why there's so much hallucination, because people uh, writing infactual posts on Reddit, and that is then fed up to the models. I mean, it's just scary to see how people have like so much trust in whatever it says,
Lane Becker is
just
president of
blindly
Wikimedia
trusting it.
Enterprise, part of the foundation responsible for Wikipedia. He sees AI's use of Wikipedia as a good thing from an information access point of view, but it ain't free. Every time you search Wikipedia, the demand on their servers costs them a little bit of money. With AI, those demands explode.
When robots come to the site, they'll click on 50 articles in under a second, right? And then it's 500 articles, 5,000 articles, 500,000 articles, 5 million articles. Like, that's just one robot.
Wikipedia has agreements in place to help cover those costs. AI companies are paying for high volume access to their content.
Ones that we've announced publicly include Google, Microsoft, Amazon, and Meta.
Wikipedia is a very big fish in the world of trusted online information.
And it's so crazy because Wikipedia, it was built, on the back of people doing free labor, and they've just given it, or they've sold it to these companies. That's crazy.
One, AI companies' need for reliable content. Some other big media players have licensing agreements for their content. But what happens to smaller players who are going it alone, relying on ad revenue?
Only in the last couple of years with AI have I said, wow, I have a free and open website. And my thank you is that it can be scraped by companies like Google.
One of the risks is that as everything comes in a summary from a search summary on Google or from ChatGPT, that the incentive to write the original content, that incentive disappears. That, my stuff's not going to be seen by a person, it's going to get summarized.
Does any of this mean humans will stop using the web altogether? Probably not. But it does mean keeping a healthy information ecosystem matters, especially as we start to use AI to carry out more tasks online for us.
If things work out right, we have something that is as exciting as the web in terms of we have a tool that we can wield for human expression in new ways. What we receive may be automated, but there's also ways to express ourselves in ways that AI helps, that let us synthesize stuff ourselves and then write something faster or create something.
A couple sure, days ago, buddy.
Protein.
Welcome back to
in copyright.
All right, so last week we saw the news that apparently the big AI companies bought, or they had in their possession, rare books and they are feeding them to the AIs and then they're burning the books. Why would they do that? Oh shit, I can't do it.
In copyright, statutory damages can be up to $150,000 per work. So if you're digitizing millions of works, it's not just like a slap on the wrist, right? It's guess wrong, go out of business.
Over the past week, you might have seen videos or images like this online of these massive warehouses full of books and what looks like almost like a book guillotine slicing off the spines before the pages are scanned into this giant AI reader. These books are being scanned, then destroyed as part of Anthropic's quest to harvest massive amounts of training data for its AI models. But a lot of people seem really confused about why they have to destroy the books. There have been tons of viral posts claiming things like AI companies want to destroy all human art because they genuinely want everyone to be joyless capitalist slaves in a future where AI occupies the actual fun hobbies. Another post claimed that Anthropic wanted to effectively destructively scan all the books in the world. There's been tons of misinformation claiming that the books that they're scanning and destroying are rare. One big account tweeted, AI companies are buying rare books, training on them, then destroying the originals forever. This is straight out of 19.
All right, so this is the news that I saw. So I fell for the fake news.
1984. But as usual, the truth about what's happening is actually a lot more nuanced. Number one, as rare book collectors have pointed out themselves, genuinely rare books are not sold by the pallet. And this digitization process where books are destroyed was also not pioneered by AI companies. The truth of the situation is a lot more complicated, and I would argue the real villain in this scenario is actually our copyright system. Derek Slater is the co-founder of Proteus Strategies. He's also an iconic copyright and tech lawyer who worked on the original Google Books project. He's a legal expert who knows the ins and outs of what's actually happening, and I'm so excited that he's joining me to break down the Anthropic book-destroying scandal and talk about what those of us who are book lovers can do to actually save the books. Derek, welcome to Power User.
Thanks for having me.
So Derek, just to set the scene, I feel like people have seen a lot of these really inflammatory videos online. Everyone is freaking out. And it's sometimes hard to tell kind of what's happening. We see these warehouses full of books. We see this like guillotine type thing, like slicing them up. What is Anthropic doing with all of these books?
So they're acquiring these books so that they can scan them, digitize the text, and then use that text to train their model. I don't know exactly which books they are, but they're probably not particularly old books because those old books might be less relevant to their training. They also might already be in the public domain and they might have been digitized, so they might have other sources. So these are books that are probably in the discard pile, are sort of things that might have been thrown out or discarded otherwise, and they can get relatively cheaply in order to get a large number of text, which then they can use to train the models.
Yeah, I saw that they were buying them by the pallet. So they don't even know like what's in them. Basically, it's like these books were gonna go to the junkyard probably or be destroyed in other ways. And so they're sort of able to buy them in bulk. I saw people saying that actually in Hollywood, you can buy books similarly for like movie sets and stuff, where you could just sort of get lots of books for pennies on the dollar.
That's right. This is a challenge, I think, for people in the book preservation, the space, libraries and so on, of what do you do when you run out of space and you can't necessarily afford to buy more archival space? You got to find somewhere to put them. And sometimes that means you have to sort of prioritize and put them into a discard bin and they end up in these sort of places.
What Anthropic has said is that these are not like rare, valuable books. So I think people, and we can kind of get into like what makes a rare book, like what books are out of print. I think there are a lot of older books that are maybe out of print that end up in these giant swaths of book. Like they're sort of buying these books in mass bulk and they're not necessarily adjudicating which books are in there. They're just sort of scanning it. But I would say that the suppliers are making those adjudications. And, at some point, somebody went through and made a judgment of like, this book is no longer worth keeping. And so I think like you'll see a lot of commentary online of people being like, well, they're burning the Library of Alexandria. Like, we're losing all of human knowledge. And I'm just wondering, like, I don't know how much truth is there to that, because yeah, sure, maybe nobody needs an old like Windows 3.0, book, but also that those types of books can be very valuable to archivists and sort of historians.
The shame of all this is that we could have built the Library of Alexandria, but it has been kept locked up by old laws, bad laws, pre-existing business structures that we haven't been able to overcome yet. I don't have any reason to believe that they're focusing on rare books, let alone focusing on destroying them, right? In many cases, there will be lots of other copies of these books, or there might be ones in libraries or digitized elsewhere. I can't say that for everything, but I have not seen any evidence that suggests that's what they're doing, let alone, as I said, intent to do it.
Reassuring, at
Anthropic is not
least.
the first tech company to scan massive amounts of books and destroy them. Decades ago, there was this effort called the Google Books Project, and I feel like this was one of the first efforts to really digitize books, and the precedents that were set around it ended up having a really big impact on how companies today can treat different books and interact with, I guess, the publishing industry. What did it aim to do, and how did it ultimately play out?
So the Google Books Project was started, over 20 years ago now. The idea was digitize books and make them searchable like the web was searchable. So Google started digitizing books, and you could search through them. It would show, short snippets from the book, not a full page, not paragraphs, et cetera, and places to go, buy the book or get it from your library if you could. They got those books in two ways. One was they worked with publishers and rights holders to...
All right, guys, I'm super sorry. I'm gonna have to tap out.